All right, folks. Well, here we are again. I was not planning on having another live session tonight for a variety of reasons, but circumstances once again have changed in a way that I think is concerning for many folks and is certainly affecting a lot of people in areas that are new and somewhat unexpected. So what has happened is there's been a major flare-up on the eastern flank of the Palisades Fire, the flank of the fire that is closest to the west side of LA. This is in the area immediately bordering Brentwood, Mandeville Canyon, and ultimately the 405 corridor. The one significant development is that the evacuation orders have been expanded all the way east to the 405 corridor proper. So there are now actually mandatory evacuations extending eastward all the way to the freeway, and then even some evacuation warnings, so voluntary evacuations on the east side of the 405. If you'll excuse me for just 2 seconds, I gotta let the dog out. She doesn't like that I'm talking to you again. Okay, go. She literally just wanted out of the bedroom that is the spare office. All right. Where were we? So we have this flare-up on the eastern flank of the Palisades Fire, and it is. I'm actually going to. Hopefully YouTube doesn't kick me off for this, but I'm going to try and share a partial screen. I won't full screen it of the ABC7 live stream because the images I think are telling the tale. It's pretty critical. Okay, so you're going to see that, and I'm going to continue to talk about what I see in the images here, and I'm going to be drawing on screen. Hopefully this will not trigger the YouTube auto copyright robot. So this is a live satellite view from the ABC7 helicopter. As you can see, this is a very active fire line. These are very active flames. There's some fairly intense fire activity. Again, this is on the eastern flank of the fire. And as you can see, this is now getting pretty close to populated areas. So you can see lines of fire trucks and emergency vehicles. These are houses. I believe what they're showing here is actually Mandeville Canyon, this road here and the canyon that it's running through, Mandeville Canyon. There are a lot of houses in that canyon. As you can see, there's also a huge number of fire engines. So they're surging a tremendous amount of resources to Mandeville Canyon right now, and in general, the 405 corridor. But this is a significant development because the fire, although it was moving slowly in this direction, was not moving particularly aggressively in this direction, and there are a number of control measures. Earlier this evening, actually while I was doing my last live stream, okay, so this gives you a perspective. That's Mandeville Canyon. Here's the fire itself. This is obviously the active fire line. There's lots of these night flying, night vision enabled Nighthawk helicopters doing water drops. That's going to be helpful, but the problem is, unlike that fast-moving but small brush fire in the Hollywood Hills a few nights ago, some of you may have joined live, this is a vastly larger fire. So while those water drops can be really effective on a small piece of the fire, look at those flames. Those are probably 50 to 100 foot tall flames. They're not as tall here, for example, along the edge. And I think this may be cresting the ridge right now. There may even be a line of fire retardant along this ridge, which is why the flames are dying down. But here's the problem. When you have a bone-dry chaparral and brush in an environment as densely vegetated and as dry as this is, those fire retardant lines are not they're not a magic line in the sand. They will greatly slow down the fire and attenuate it, but they can still slowly chew through the line, and once it makes it to the other side, the fire can flare up like this again, and that's a significant flare-up. So I think what we're seeing on the right is evacuation traffic. In fact, there's already some traffic jams forming again. I almost can't believe this is happening again in another part of Los Angeles, but this is all live. For those just joining, this is the Palisades Fire. There are new evacuations, And what I'm going to try and do actually, and maybe YouTube will like this better, I'm going to pop out this window and make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to dual screen it so we can bring up watch duty in a separate window here. So just bear with me a second while I get this set up. I'm doing it live. Okay, so here's ABC7. You can see the fire and the evacuations in that window here. Meanwhile, we have watch duty over here. I'm going to get this to the same window size. Okay, this is what we wanted to see. So hopefully, I'm assuming that everybody is seeing now a dual screen with the live helicopter footage in the far left, center right, the footage from the ground, ABC7, and on the far right, the watch duty app, which I'm going to go in now. Let me just take a sip of tea here. You can watch these pretty impressive flames and fire behavior on this fire on the left right now. Let me just try and verify this is working by going back to my own video of the live stream. Okay. Yep, it looks like it's appearing as I intended, so I'm going to go back. Okay. Very dramatic footage over here. So here's where we are. We're talking about this region. So obviously the Palisades Fire, there's a large evacuation, as I mentioned, extending from Santa Monica to Malibu to the 101 freeway, now also extending to the northeast to Ventura Boulevard and to the east, all the way to and even past the I-405 corridor. In fact, it looks like even since I've been speaking, they have further expanded the evacuations to the east of 405. I gotta tell you, this is not something I was expecting to happen. It was always within the realm of possibility, but this is definitely not what I thought was a likely outcome for tonight. So to orient people, since I know this map is kind of small on some screens, this is the I-405 corridor. So the 405, of course, runs through West LA, over Sepulveda Pass, and down into the San Fernando Valley. This is Ventura Boulevard, and there are evacuations extending all the way to the south side of Ventura Boulevard. Again, that is remarkable in its own right. But again, here you can see, I'm going to highlight it again, the 405 freeway. What you can see is to the left of it, there are now mandatory evacuations all the way to the 405 and voluntary or evacuation warnings now extending east of the 405 into portions of Bel Air. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this live stream, aside from the fact this is affecting quite a few people somewhat unexpectedly, is that this does mean that the evacuation warnings extend, not including, but extend right up to the corner of UCLA campus. So UCLA campus is right here. Now, to be very clear, UCLA is not currently under any kind of evacuation, mandatory or otherwise. However, it is rather close to the edge of the voluntary evacuation zone, which has expanded very quickly this evening in that direction. So just for further perspective, again, this is UCLA, so technically the evacuation warning does extend literally to the road on the northwest border of campus. Now, I would still be very surprised if this fire, excuse me, if this fire made it to the east of the 405. I still think that is highly unlikely. However, I suppose, given the circumstances, we can't rule it out, and I think that's the basis for this voluntary, again, east of the 405, it is voluntary evacuation warning. What does a voluntary evacuation order, or let's see it, okay, I'm going to bring on the audio actually over here.
David Ono really quickly. We're looking at Tim Caputo's live shot. David Ono, you were wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, I found the intersection where Tim is, and if Tim can hear me, hopefully he can clarify. Tim is at Havenhurst Avenue right here. We followed it just like he said from Ventura Boulevard is up in this direction. He went in all the way up, and he's at Encino Hills Drive, and it turns into Calneva Drive. So Tim is basically right here. this is the shot. Tim, from your camera angle, are you looking down the hill or up the hill? You're probably looking down the hill, right?
Yeah, this is down the hill towards Ventura. Actually, if you pinpoint where we are, we're actually on a dead end physically here. So essentially 10, 15 homes behind us up the hill. Down the hill, Havenhurst is essentially going towards Ventura, which are now looking.
Okay, well, anyway, I'll return to that if there's important information. Clearly, there's a lot of evacuation traffic going downhill. You can see that the LA County Sheriff and other law enforcement agencies are surging resources, presumably to assist in traffic control and the evacuation itself. As I was saying, my personal best guess, gut feeling, is that we do not ultimately see fire east of the 405. But since there's no guarantee here, this is something I think that a lot of folks are going to stay up very late watching tonight, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen, and these are unusual conditions. To be clear, the winds are not extremely strong. In fact, that's actually part of why this has happened. Because the winds are no longer blowing very strongly in this direction, instead of backing very slowly against the winds in this direction, now there's much less resistance to moving to the east. So fire likes to move upslope, all else equal, unless something pushes it downslope. And so now this fire can move up some of these canyons potentially. That's one of the problems we're seeing as these winds die down and the fire becomes a little more terrain dominated. And the other concern is that there is so much fuel here, so much very dry fuel, that the fire can to a certain extent create its own localized wind conditions. And so you can get some erratic movement of a fire front that's probably somewhere. So again, this is Mandeville Canyon in green. So all of those police vehicles and that traffic jam you're seeing is right here. The fire is not that far, and this is the perimeter from earlier today. We don't know where it is now, so it may be getting up into this vicinity. My guess is what was done earlier was that there were certain efforts to paint this ridgeline with fire retardant. That's likely what was done or was attempted to be done. We know that there's fire retardant on this ridge. But again, the challenge is fire can technically chew through the retardant if it burns long enough, and it's unclear whether there was time to finish the full retardant line over here, just west of Mandeville Canyon. And then, of course, there are structures nestled in here, which is probably on the wrong side of that line anyway. And again, these evacuation warnings extend all the way up to Ventura Boulevard in Encino. So we now have evacuations for the same fire, the Palisades Fire, in Encino, in parts even technically of Bel Air, technically parts of Brentwood, Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, of course, in Malibu, at Topanga, and extending all the way west to the 405 freeway in the western San Fernando Valley. So I will pan over there just to give a sense, and I'll zoom out a little bit since I got to do that. Again, this is the geographic scope of the evacuations, and the number of people that they affect is pretty remarkable. I'm just trying to see if we can get some additional information here. I'm not sure that wind is actually correct, so I'm going to leave it on here for now. I'm also going to pull up some additional information here, so I'm going to minimize this as well. I'm going to try and keep the ABC stream in the left of the screen. Hopefully that keeps people happy. And by people, I mean the AI algorithm that YouTube uses to sniff out copyright violations. The reason I bring this up on the right, this is the weather radar, and there wasn't a lot to show on it for most of today, which is why I didn't show it in the earlier live session, but lo and behold, here's the new blow-up centered about here, and it's small but pretty intense. And this is now getting pretty close. Again, the 405 corridor is dashed here. This is 101. So we are seeing origin of a pretty aggressive plume here. If okay, so I'm going to bring back the watch duty on the right. See what the watch duty text updates are here. See if the Wilshire camera. Okay, so here is on the right now the last 15 minutes from this camera near Wilshire. So actually, and this is maybe part of the concern, you can see a little bit of plume rotation. Do you see the plume kind of rotating like this? That's a sign of a certain level of organization. And toward the end, you can actually see this even greater flare-up. So I'm trying to see the perspective. So this camera, okay, so sorry, this camera is, okay, so it's on Wilshire in Santa Monica, in downtown Santa Monica. So this camera's looking northeastward. So Mandeville Canyon might be through here. I think that is Mandeville Canyon here. We have what appears to be a rotating plume here, and that is somewhat concerning, because that means that this portion of the fire may be creating its own weather right now. Do you see that rotating plume? You can see that sense of cyclonic rotation, and then at the base of the rotation, you can see that big flaming flare-up with very intense, tall flames. This is always a concern when you see it in such close proximity to populated areas. So I'm trying to cross-reference that from what we're seeing here. This is not, I don't think, the region I'm talking about. That may be buried within the smoke somewhere. I'm trying to see what we see. Even as the stream has begun, you can see that this fire has made quite a lot of progress towards this road where the fire resources are staged on right here. Okay, so I'm going to leave this as the live view. This is actually looking worse. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to switch over a few things so I can see what I need to see. So first of all, briefly, you're going to see this, of course, this is the flare-up on the Palisades fire. I'm not going to belabor the point because there's other information that makes that a lot clearer. But I'm going to bring this over into the other tab so that you see what I want to see. Okay, so let me bring the audio back here for a minute.
Until they stop the forward progress of that flare-up. And then inevitably, another flare-up will occur, and then you're playing a game of whack-a-mole. But they've got resources in place. They're doing their best, but the fire is not blowing in this direction. You don't have wind blowing into this community. It's actually not blowing much at all. It's creeping downhill slowly with the fuel that is on this hillside. So hopefully that'll give them the luxury of time to continue whack.
I'm not sure I agree that that's creeping fire behavior. I hate to say that's distinct from creeping fire behavior. It's definitely not moving as fast downslope as it is upslope. But it is okay. So that may be the rotating plume. By the way, that feature here. So this is the part. It's not aggressively rotating in this image, so this is a little bit less concerning than that other camera angle, but it's still a problem.
This is the DC-10 watching dropping 12,000 gallons of fire retardant repeatedly in this area as I was traveling up the Sepulveda Pass into the San Fernando Valley. They were painting this entire mountainside with red fire retardant. So that fire is going to have trouble traveling anywhere too fast. But because of the amount of fire and the dynamic nature of this fire, as you mentioned, they are issuing those orders, and it's good that they did that because we are not taking any chances on a week like this.
You certainly can't, and when you talk about it, especially in an area like Mandeville Canyon, one way in, one way out, there's only one way to go to evacuate. There's only one direction to go, really. And so the good news, as Jory mentioned, people have left. Now, can you give us a sense of how the footprint has changed just since you've been there? You say it's creeping, and that's a good shot there. In fact, that ridge line that you talked about that they're going to try to defend, which is between the fire and the lower area or the area of Mandeville Canyon. That ridgeline, we could see a little bit of that pink phosgenic on the ground there, but are you seeing the perimeter of the fire, the footprint, expanding to the east?
It's expanding to the east, which is my concern. It's not expanding to the north, which is why I'm breathing a sigh of relief for Tarzana and Encino, as scary as the visual is if you're in the valley. On the east side here, it's a little bit more dynamic because we don't know where those lines are, and it's already creeping over some of these fire roads. We don't like to see that. Those fire roads are man-made fire breaks that are used for access by firefighters, but they're also meant to stop fires that are moving through the mountains, especially in a non-windy day like tonight. This is not a windy night. So
All right, so I'm going to take a look at some comments from folks. I haven't been reading those as much. I'm going to keep this up on the left. I'm continuing to keep my fingers crossed that YouTube doesn't get angry with my use of the ABC live stream in this way. I do think it's a critical usage, arguably a public safety usage of something, and creative reuse. So not that I need to justify it to this audience, but hopefully others will see it similarly. So there isn't really a strong wind pushing this fire to the east. That's the good news. Or the north. There's a weak downslope flow, though, that might end up pushing this down canyons later. But the bigger problem is that this is currently a terrain and fuel-driven fire as opposed to being a wind-driven fire earlier. So it's not really being pushed in any particular direction by the prevailing wind. It's creating its own dynamics due to the topography, the vegetation, and essentially the self-reinforcing feedbacks that it's producing through some of these fire whirls and localized weather conditions. Again, the videographer described this as creeping fire. That's not really what that is. That's definitely a higher intensity fire. These are sustained upslope runs. So you can see right now this little filament of fire is moving upslope, and it's producing flame lengths that are probably 50 feet tall in this space. So that looks like it's mostly chaparral, so dense brush that's burning. And again, this may slow down when it gets to the ridgeline. It may slow down as it goes downhill, but right now the fire is kind of doing what it wants. And I think, if nothing else, recent events and recent experience, not just this week, but over years, suggest that, you should have a little humility, too. You can see this thing is spotting like crazy. Look at these individual, there's just these spot fires all over the place. One initial indication that things were not quite going according to plan earlier was there was an incident that I didn't show live. It happened right after my previous live stream this evening ended, actually. There was, and by all accounts, all the firefighters are safe. Nobody was injured, but there was a burnover of equipment, meaning that the fire moved so quickly upslope near one of the helibases, up on the top of the mountains in the Santa Monica Mountains, that they only had time to get out with their lives. So they all piled into a couple of different vehicles and skedaddled. By all accounts, they're fine, but they did lose fire equipment. There were fire vehicles that ended up catching on fire because they didn't even have time to move them off the fire road. They also lost the helibase facility, so all of the equipment that was up on that ridgeline burned over. Again, as far as I have heard, no people were still there when that happened, but it was a relatively quick escape, suggesting that this fire is pulling some undesirable tricks at the moment. And again, you can see in the evacuation zone that's up on screen in ABC7 on the left, that's all the way up to the commercial strip along Ventura Boulevard. If anybody is familiar with the area, there's like 5 or 10 miles of low to mid-rise commercial buildings lining Ventura Boulevard on both sides of the 405, and technically everything on one side of that street is now up to and included in that evacuation warning. Now again, They don't necessarily draw these evacuation zones according to areas they think are literally at risk, but they are a combination of convenient geographic features, road features, and also taking into account the time and the road networks it will take to evacuate people. So all of those are factored in. Do I think it's going to make it all the way up to Ventura Boulevard or east of the 405? No. However, again, this particular event has shown us that there can be some surprises. And I think the goal is that nobody gets caught by surprise tonight, because it is late in the evening on a Friday night, and folks may not be awake all night paying attention, because, especially given that they thought this fire was headed in the other direction previously. All right, here's some questions. So to be clear, I don't think what we saw was a fire tornado. That's something that's a greater process than I think. But what we did see was what's known as a rotating column, which is still an indication that the fire is starting to create its own localized adverse weather conditions, fostering greater intensity and forward spread. So that still is a concern. But I don't think that was actually a full-fledged fire tornado. There could have been lesser fire whirls within it that we didn't see. That's not that unusual. That actually happens on most fires of a given intensity. But the rotating column is a bit concerning. In fact, let's bring that up on the radar. We may be able to see this because this is relatively close to the radar site. So I'm going to zoom in. I got to go to a double panel here. Okay, what do I want? What do I want here? I want the storm relative velocity, because we're looking for rotation in the plume. Let's see if it's there. So obviously the plume is originating somewhere in this vicinity. So what we're looking for is what we're looking for is any potential rotation in this part of the plume. It's a little hard to tell. It's possible there's some red and green right next to each other here, so maybe a little bit of rotation sort of over here. Let me go to a different radar site. I'll go to, of course, the Los Angeles radar site is not operational currently. That's 23 minutes old. It's not that old. Let's see. Okay, so yes, this is confirming there is rotation actually. So this is from 23 minutes ago. Look at that, it's weak, it's not strong rotation. So again, this is a rotating plume rather than a fire tornado, but there is, you see there's red here and green here. So that suggests of winds coming from two different directions in close proximity, co-located with a rather high intensity fire plume. So I think we've confirmed that there is a rotating convection column associated with this flare-up. I'm going to go back to this audio.
Issuing orders and letting people know that it was time to evacuate. And we know that sometimes people are reluctant to leave. People want to stay and fight. What's your thought now? If you were called upon to evacuate, are you inclined to maybe stay with a hose and stick it out, or what are your thoughts?
You know, based on my training and expertise, and I'm kind of abnormal, I would stay a little bit until it got to the point where I have to leave. I would tell people, you know what, get your cars, back them in the driveways, get your stuff in the car, be ready, set, go, and just kind of monitor it. And if the police tell you to get out, you know what, you got to go.
Yeah, well, and that's what we that is what we keep hearing. When you start seeing smoke, you need to get out. A lot of people, we already know that the resources are stretched so thinly right now with the firefighters. And so a lot of homeowners, they are taking matters into their own hands. They're helping their neighbors. They're spraying things down. They're putting out fires. We saw the other night someone putting out a fire in the Hollywood fire, a tree that had gone up in flames.
You know, Pauline, just as another point, there's a Ralph's supermarket, and I'm not plugging them, right over by White Oak and Ventura. and the line of cars at the recharging stations is crazy. Because all these electric vehicles, you know, if you're not charged, they're not going to move.
Yeah, so many people have lost power over the last few days. Wow, that certainly makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure a big cause of worry for everyone who needs to power up when you have lost your power.
And yeah, there's people who've been without power for days and been unable to recharge their cars. This is an interesting thing to think about. A note right now about the Getty Museum, and that they have evacuated. They've evacuated the area of the Getty Museum. Of course, it's a world-class museum with world-class and very valuable works of art there. They have a fire suppression system that is second to none, both for the grounds of the property and for the museum itself. The folks there have very little concern that there's going to be a loss there, but just in case, they are complying. This is a statement. Getty is complying with the current evacuation orders. It is closed with emergency staff on site. That very short statement, an encapsulation of the preparation that they have undergone to ensure the safety of the priceless artwork that is stored and on exhibit at the Getty.
Yeah, the last thing you want to see is them, you know, leave anything vulnerable. But of course, they are very well informed on how to safeguard their situation. David, do you have more information over there?
I do have the Getty Center here, and you can see they kind of have a lot of open space, and they are well prepared. And I think the lesson that we got from Getty is remember when Getty Villa 3 nights ago was in trouble. I mean, there was fire all around it. And now that we see the after effects of the fire, we see that so much of Palisades were lost, but Getty Villa was not. They know what they're doing when it comes to fire suppression and keeping themselves safe because they have that invaluable art, and they've thought this through very carefully. This is Getty Center now. Eventually I'll show you Getty Villa, and the destruction was everywhere, all around it, but it survived. Getty Center, you know that they are going to be on top of it and be able to keep themselves safe. But just to go closer, so Getty Center here, right up the 405, here's where the fire is. So it's pretty close, but there's a lot of community, and you know firefighters are doing everything they can to hold this fire back. Getty Center is going to be in good shape when it's all said and done. We hope, you know, fingers crossed. But if anybody's going to survive this, it's going to be Getty Center. And also, if I could, I love what Bruce Thomas said when it comes to being prepared, because I'm going to show you, I'm going to expand this out. So we're talking about the evacuations going on. Let me see here. I'm sorry. Excuse me 1 second as I kind of get my bearings here. And all right, you know what? I'm going to throw it back to you because I lost my place, and I don't want to bore everybody to tears. But what I was going to say about Bruce is that he is about two exits down from the voluntary evacuation area, but he's already thought about getting himself out, which is, he's setting a great example. He's taking pictures of the items in his home. And so just because you're not in the voluntary evacuation or the yellow zone, you still should be thinking about getting out and being prepared, because all of these communities in here could eventually be in danger. I just found it. I'm sorry about that. I'm there wasting all this valuable airtime. But this is Louise Avenue, and then Bruce, if I expand that a little bit further, this is White Oak right here. So this is his community. It's a little bit off of where the evacuation zones are. There's the Encino Reservoir, and here's Louisa Avenue.
Okay, I'm gonna mute that for now. There's another update on the radar, and again, there's the most recent frame here, the second to last frame here. That's a pretty intense flare up in terms of the intensity on weather radar, and there is some weak rotation in that plume. For those just joining, by the way, several people are asking. I was not planning on having another session tonight. Again, I was really hoping not to, in fact, for a variety of reasons, but there's been a major flare-up on the eastern flank of the Palisades fire, to the extent that there are now evacuation orders all the way east to the 405 freeway, with evacuation warnings to the east of the 405 freeway, above Bel Air, as well as evacuation warnings all the way north to Ventura Boulevard. And the fire is exhibiting some signs of fairly extreme fire behavior. different extreme fire behavior. This is not a wind-driven fire anymore. In fact, the winds are not very strong. This is now a terrain and fuel-driven fire, which can still cause its own problems and is doing so right now. I personally still think it is unlikely that the fire will reach the 405 corridor or the Ventura Boulevard corridor, but again, since we can't rule it out, that is why there are evacuation warnings all the way up to both places. I am a bit more concerned about Mandeville Canyon area. That looks to be pretty imminently at threat tonight. There are a lot of resources in place, but we've seen this fire do surprising things before. Now it's doing it again. I've been getting a lot of questions about UCLA campus. Again, there's no evacuation advisory or warning in effect for campus right now, but the very southeasternmost part of the evacuation warning does essentially end on the other side of the street from the northwestern corner of campus. Do I believe UCLA will be threatened by this fire? I would be very surprised if it was. Can I completely rule it out? No. Do I think it's exceptionally unlikely? Yes. Just checking in on some updates here. So I'm going to bring the audio back on ABC7 for a minute, give my voice a break for a moment.
You know, making some runs east on some of those canyon hills as it becomes more of a topography-driven fire. There's no wind out here. None of the trees are moving out. There's no breeze. So I'm not worried about the wind pushing this fire. It's just if it gets on a hillside and starts making a run up a hillside, you know, that's where things start to get a little dicey, and that's why you very much have to, you know, heed these evacuation warnings and these evacuation orders as well.
All right, and so in that vein, we're going to check with Danny Romero and talk about the winds. We know they've shifted somewhat. They're not the Santa Ana winds that are blowing northeast to southwest or north or east to west and blowing this thing in a certain direction, right? Oh, apparently your mic's not working. We're going to have to get a new battery for your mic. You know, we've been normally these mics.
Okay, I'm up now. Now I'm up now. Got it.
All right.
They got it. The winds. Yeah, you're exactly right, Mark. They have changed. I want to give you. We have a great picture here on my time lapse on the web computer of how that fire just the profile of it changed for people in the valley. Smoky, and kind of been used to that the last couple of days. You can see in the distance, okay, it's out there, it's just smoke, I'm all right. But then right about 6:30 or so, it dramatically changed, and that glow in the night was that flames, and that got everybody concerned. Now, a couple things I want to touch on that Gabe mentioned in terms of the science of fire. He mentioned about, and the captain too, let's this, and he mentioned how the fire's burning downhill, moves slower, 8 times faster when it's uphill. Reason being, when the fire's going uphill, it's drying out the vegetation ahead of it. So as it gets there, it's feeding itself. So when it comes to that vegetation, it's already pre-warmed, pre-dried, and that flame just builds itself more uphill. So one of the good things here is that, number one, yeah, it's going downhill, like you said, slower. The wind speeds, we've seen those going like right around, they have been in the single-digit range here for most of the hour, last couple hours, but changes are coming. Go ahead.
Danny, thank you. We're actually going to go to Eyewitness News Report.
By the way, that description that you just heard, that was actually pretty good. That's a good characterization of how it works and what we're seeing.
Right here in the heart of Brentwood. I'm just going to step out of the way so you can see that there is traffic management happening right now at the intersection of Kenter Avenue and Sunset Boulevard. It looks like they are not allowing people to go up north to Kenter Avenue. We haven't seen too many people going that way, but I see now people are trying to make that way over over there. But it seems like this is a very controlled situation. We are seeing people evacuate. We are not too far from North Bowling Green Way, and along that stretch, you know, it's an affluent community. And we were seeing people with their trunks popped, with stuff inside, and spraying down their homes. You're actually looking at a Mercedes here off of Sunset Boulevard. The homeowner there, she did not want to talk, but we saw her loading up her Mercedes full of stuff, like last minute things that she needs to take. I think she's about to pull off. So yeah, we're seeing a very organized, I guess, evacuation, if you will, where people are leaving and trying to find shelter due to these mandatory evacuations. Mark, Colleen?
All right, Tim, that is, we're watching this all, and you're hearing the sirens, but it does look controlled, and that is a good thing. We're going to check in now with Tim Caputo. He had to move his location from where he was off of Havenhurst. Now he's in the Encino area. Tim Pulliam, Tim Caputo. Can you give us a shout and tell us what's happening where you are?
Yeah, we kind of worked our way around when we last spoke. As you mentioned, we were on Havenhurst, essentially at the top, the kind of main thoroughfare out of the hills here. We kind of worked our way around up Mulholland and down here to Encino Hills Drive. This is a street that kind of runs along to kind of get a vantage point of the glow itself. In fact, this looks a lot better than it did just an hour ago, which is good news. This is still in the evacuation zone where folks have essentially left. There are a couple people we saw kind of lingering, slowly getting out of here, but obviously a situation where they've been watching this closely as well. I talked about it earlier too, other than the North Valley. So you've seen the smoke from the Palisades fire. You know it's there. It doesn't.
So what you just heard from that reporter saying it looks like it's died down, I think he's looking at this part right here. Unfortunately, both the southern and the northern flank of this fire have really flared up and are continuing to flare up. So this is a view all the way from Beverly Hills looking west toward the 405 corridor, and it looks pretty intense at the moment.
For a second. Harris lives right here. I was just talking to him a second ago. Obviously, you've seen the smoke from the Palisades fire all week long. When did it start to get real and start to feel a little different?
About 2 or 3 hours ago, it got a lot redder. It looked like it was coming this way to the left, which is probably, I think, the west. And it started to spread also going that way to Tarzana. But it's way better right now, way more under control.
When the alert comes on your phone and you find out you're in an area that needs to leave, is this something you've been thinking about the last couple of days?
Yeah, my wife's been freaking out since Tuesday. She's been packed. Her entire closet is gone. But
so I just turned on the live flight tracking layer within Watch Duty. You can see that on the right, the purple swirly things, those are helicopters. Clearly, all of the ones that are flying now, since it's dark, are night vision enabled, or at least night flying enabled. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it looks like a Chinook double rotary. They're pretty close to each other. So it looks like they're focusing on this northern flank of the fire up here. It may be closer to homes than it appears in this vicinity. Also, via Watch Duty, there was just an update that LA County has requested the Orange County Quick Response Force night flying helicopters. They'll probably receive them. There is some risk in that, of course, because there is also a fire risk down in Orange County. So you send them north, it means you don't have them available somewhere else. But I think this is a very strong candidate for using night flying water dropping helicopters. They're likely to be able to produce a pretty significant benefit with this specific type of situation. So makes sense to me they've been ordered.
Dave, you're on the 405 and you have a big development.
Yeah, we're seeing some interesting things happen here as far as road closures on the 405. I just saw CHP perform a traffic break on the 405 at Skirball Center, and they had the southbound lanes completely stopped. They just actually released those lanes, but what they left behind are a bunch of cones on Getty Center Drive to close that off-ramp. So they're doing a lot more on this side of town as far as closing roads and closing ramps and really trying to get the traffic under control. I'm seeing LA City parking control already arrive on scene. They have crews here with traffic control signs already arriving on scene. So they're really trying to get the traffic control side of this really figured out even before the fire gets, a little bit closer to this end of things. Like we were saying, it appears to be, a slow kind of topography-driven crawl to the north, a little bit to the east. But if it does make a run to the east towards the 405, you have this, this big highway here to worry about, this big traffic concern. And I think that's what authorities are working on right now. So if you do see intermittent hits of traffic on the 405, that's what's going on. And, if this fire does get closer to the 405, then that can definitely be impacted a little more longer term.
Okay, so again, the southbound 405, you're saying at this point is shut down?
It is open now. They had it shut down, but they are releasing traffic now. They had it shut down, I think, to set up a hard closure on that Skirball Center off-ramp from the southbound 405. They have it flowing now, but of course there's a lot of backup now going southbound. So watch out for that if you're going southbound on the 405 from the valley towards the west side. On the west side coming north, I don't see any traffic problems there right now, but you're just dealing with all that smoke. And as I was coming northbound towards the valley.
So one reason why there's so much concern about Mandeville Canyon is that it's quite a long one-way in, one-way out type of situation. At the end of the road is at the top of the canyon. The fire is somewhere here, it's moving at least somewhat in this direction. A lot of people live in this canyon. This road is lined with houses, and you can see it's quite a long way out. You got to go all the way south to the very first street that it intersects with is not until you get all the way down here. So that's one reason why this is a particular concern, is I needed to get people out of there. That makes sense. It's also, again, in a canyon. If the fire gets into this vicinity here, it's going to want to go upslope. It's going to want to roar right up the canyon, even without any strong winds, because, as was mentioned, fire moving upslope preheats the air and the vegetation in front of it, thereby sort of self-accelerating its spread.
Much closer towards Mandeville Canyon Road. Those structure protection units maintain their position along Mandeville Canyon Road. Thankfully, we understand that area has already mostly evacuated. But for now, this fire seems to be meeting its end. And by the way, if the fire department, all of these departments who are working together, can manage to bring this fire to a stop here at the Sepulveda Pass, that will be essentially the end of the road, so to speak, at least in this direction and the northern direction for the Palisades fire, because there really is just not much more real estate for it to chew up. The mountains pretty much end at the 405, certainly at this rate, in this direction. It's not going to jump to 405. Nothing like that is going to happen at all. So we are starting to breathe quite a bit easier as we get a closer look as the hours take on here and the firefight continues. Mother Nature's cooperating. The winds are very light. The fire attack is aggressive, and the residents are heeding the warnings. And I think we're really looking much better here just in the last 30 minutes.
I'm not so convinced that's entirely true. The fire's actually flared up quite a lot, as far as I can tell, in the last 30 minutes. It's possible they're not seeing the other side of the fire through the smoke, but I do agree that, again, it's quite unlikely this thing actually makes it all the way to the 405, let alone over it. But it might be a little bit overconfident to say it definitely won't happen. Something else I'm seeing right now is that if you look at the radar imagery I've got up on the right, I'm going to show this in the bottom plume because it shows the smoke a bit better. If you look at the original frame of this, the plume is more like this, but you can see that now it's actually shifted more this way, and that is an eastward shift. So there has been a little bit of a wind shift, at least at the level where this plume is. So that does look like there's a shift in the winds, potentially an onshore push. Not strong winds, but possibly just enough to be causing what we're seeing now. So this may be some of the reason for the concern along the 405 corridors. There has potentially been a subtle wind shift.
Because the winds have died down quite a bit, we're not seeing these embers kind of fly, and they can fly, as much as a mile under high wind conditions. The winds have slowed down quite a bit. So, as Chris was saying, it's running out of real estate, and the 405 is an enormous fire break as long as the winds are behaving themselves. And this is what he means. So, as they do structure protection throughout this area, granted, this area is under duress.
So there's another question about UCLA. I would be very surprised if UCLA ultimately needed to evacuate for this fire. I cannot completely rule it out, of course, but I would be more surprised if this fire made it to the east of 405 than I have been about what it's done so far. Let's put it that way. I am strongly disinclined to say never, because that's not how the world works, but it's very unlikely that the campus will need to evacuate. There are currently there are not even precautionary evacuation warnings. There is nothing in effect for campus. It's closer than it once was. The fire definitely is closer than it previously was, as are the evacuations, but this is evacuating campus. Well, first of all, there are numerous routes of egress from campus, so there's no concern about bottlenecks on a single road or a pair of roads. And there is a campus plan that has been established previously that would go into effect, but I don't think we're going to see it with this fire. As I mentioned earlier today, somewhat ironically, there would likely need to be a major fire directly north of campus, so in Bel Air, and there would need to be very strong downslope winds. So if we had seen a fire, for example, in Bel Air on Tuesday night, that is one of the only scenarios where I could envision there actually being evacuations for a wildfire on UCLA campus proper. And since that's not what we're seeing right now, neither are we seeing fire east of 405, nor are we seeing strong downslope winds. That's not our current scenario. I'm actually going to check my email because somebody just messaged to say that the UCLA campus sent out a message saying to be prepared. That's not too surprising. I don't think it's in contrast to anything I've just said. But let me just see what the message says, since I probably would have received it. And I'm trying to do this on my phone because I want to keep what's up on the screen currently up. So I actually have not received any notice. Let me see what is on social media. So I'm going to bring the audio back for a minute while I check my messages.
But it does make access that much easier, and it's one of those, yet another concern we shouldn't have to think about, but unfortunately in this day and age we do.
Well, they are helping out with the intimidation force, being that they did mobilize the National Guard, and they really have been deterring people, and they do have that curfew in effect for evacuation zones. So they are doing a lot of things to try to make sure that they can protect homes, because Sheriff Luna said, we're not messing around. He really had some direct words, and they really have been getting in the National Guard has really been a game changer for, I know, the Eaton fire. Let's go back out to Tim Pulliam. Tim, you're in Brentwood, and how are you seeing things right now? Does it seem like it's calming down with the evacuation with cars, or does it seem like it's picking up? Tim might not be in position.
You know, cars are still. Can you hear me, Colleen?
Yes, I can hear you now, Tim.
Yes. Colleen, Mark, I'm still seeing people come this way to go the evacuation route, you know, so things have not calmed down. It looks like they're not allowing people to go west on Sunset Boulevard, obviously because of the mandatory evacuation. But it is controlled. It's not chaotic. Like I said before, we are seeing people pack up things and get out of here. We traveled down North Bowling Green Way, and we saw home after home, people packing up their trunks, spraying down their homes and leaving. So that is very good news. But this is the scene that you're seeing right now. Very controlled traffic management. Colleen, Mark?
Indeed, and that's good to hear. And for those of you who are just joining us, and just to recap, what we've seen in the last 2 hours or so is a flare-up of the Palisades fire. A flare-up that caused a lot of concern for people in the San Fernando Valley and the another portion of West Los Angeles, including the Mountain Gate community and Mandeville Canyon. The fire department, the various fire departments that have been working on this fire anticipated perhaps a run to the west and the north, into the San Fernando Valley and into West LA, so that there was a great line of Phos-Chek fire retardant that was laid down by a DC-10 in an effort basically to box this fire in. You're seeing the aerial view from Air 7. This is the valley, and to the left of your screen was the area of the fire that they have been trying to box in. And in order to do that, they've got a line of firefighters, a number of about 150 or so, perhaps more by now, that are manning a ridge, a fire road, and flanking that fire road is that line of fire retardant that was laid down from the air by the DC-10 a few hours ago. What we have seen from Chris Christie, and he's confirming this, is that as the fire has hit that line, it has slowed down significantly. It's also hit a downhill slope, which is slowing it down even more. And so it's not getting, at this point, to Mandeville Canyon. It's stalled basically on the next ridge to the west of Mandeville Canyon, and that is of great help to everyone there. And also helping out is the fact that Mandeville Canyon, a lot of those folks have been evacuated for quite some time, and that's helping this effort too. So people starting to look at this, and though the orange glow in the sky is ominous, and this flare-up is not, it's certainly not fun to look at if you're, you know, in a nearby community. It's looking better than it did just about an hour and a half ago.
It really is. On the right side of our camera, I think we're still seeing our live shot from Burbank, and it does look a lot better than it did about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, when it really was causing a lot of anxiety for a lot of our viewers. David Ono, you have another update with sort of more of a location there.
Yeah, I really thought we garnered a lot from Tim Pulliam's shot, and I bring the map up here, and just to give you an idea of the characteristics of how to evacuate. So Tim is right here at Sunset Boulevard and Kenter. He was talking about how people right here at Bowling Green are kind of loading up and going right on Sunset. Sunset Boulevard is blocked going west. So, and this map shows every reason why. It's the pink. They don't want anybody to go into this pink area because that is the mandatory evacuation zone. They want to get people out, not let people go in. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking about trying to get into the evacuation zone to help somebody, you're not going to be able to do that. You got to get out, and so people are heading basically east on Sunset Boulevard in the Brentwood area, just kind of getting out, get to the 405, go north or south, but south, as you can see, is pretty clear right now, and you're a lot safer. But either way, prepare for slowdowns, but just get out of the area. And as you can see, the voluntary evacuation zone extends to the right or to the east of the 405, all the way up to almost the 101. It goes up to Ventura Boulevard. So keep that in mind. Just by hanging out in the 405, you're still in the danger zone, so be careful.
Absolutely. Great advice, David. Well, we now have somebody join us, I believe, via Zoom. Tracy Park, council member from District 11. Are you part of the...
All right, folks, so I'm trying to decide if there's going to be much additional information for me to add at this point in the evening. So you can still see, it does look like there's a bit of a wind shift, aloft at least, from blowing in this direction to blowing in this direction. So that is part of why there's probably a little bit of movement toward the 405. in the east. But I'm not sure that this fire has necessarily decreased that much in intensity. The reflectivity on radar does look like to have decreased over the period of this live stream, although that could easily flare back up again. It looks like it actually is doing that right now on the camera, so I wouldn't necessarily read too much into that. But I did see the alert from UCLA, and it is not telling anything really different from what I have been saying this evening, that there is a warning extending to nearby, to campus, but that there is no evacuation for campus, nor even an advisory. So they did advise being prepared, which is always a good idea. I am not personally overly concerned still, even with these developments, about UCLA campus or the region east of the 405. That's not 100% guarantee, but right now I don't see the kind of very alarming weather conditions that we would need to see to actually put those regions at risk from an event like this, at least as I see it right now. There are a bunch of night flying helicopters. You can see this. It sounds like they ordered a couple more from Orange County. They may be coming up tonight. Okay, I've got to do some moderation here. Again, just to clarify, because there's been some misinformation in the comments section, there is not an evacuation order for campus, nor did the official UCLA campus communication suggest that there was. So there was a message sent out, which is generally in line with good proactive communication policy, given everything that's happened tonight. But there are no evacuations in effect for campus, nor do I expect there to be at this point. Now, it's good to know about the flex night shift settings not transferring over. Maybe I'll actually turn that back on so I can eventually sleep tonight. There we go. Thanks for letting me know. So I'm going to go back to watch duty, do one more check of things, see if there's anything I can further communicate. I knew there's going to be a lot of interest in this particular flare-up. It's very visible from most of West LA, as well as a lot of the San Fernando Valley. There are a bunch of new people in evacuation orders in Mandeville Canyon, all the way east to the 405. That does technically include the Mount St. Mary's University, but not UCLA. It does include the Getty Museum, which was not previously the case, and it also includes some neighborhoods as far north as Ventura Boulevard in Encino. So that does affect a bunch more people. I understand why people are freaked out. This fire is very visible, probably from a very wide region, given that there's now flames on this side of the Santa Monica Mountains, and then also the southern sort of flank. So in all three cardinal directions where people live. And I think that it's likely that things will settle down at some point overnight. I can't guarantee that 100%. So I think if you're within any of the evacuation advisories or order zones, this is definitely something to take seriously. I do believe that the main reason they issued the warnings as far east as they did into this vicinity, east of the 405 and all the way to Ventura Boulevard, is just so that people would be aware before they went to sleep that there's at least a slight chance that they might need to take further action overnight. But I don't think that's the plan or the expectation from anyone. And if you're in an order, it's a bit different. If you're in Mandeville Canyon, of course, that place is at risk tonight, so you should already be leaving or gone. But I was not planning on having the session tonight. Let me just bring my camera back on, since I think I've achieved most of what I can at the moment. Let me just bring that back up. So I'm going to try and get some rest, but it has been quite the evening here. That's for sure. This is now the third night in a row where I've done a second live stream later than expected because the conditions suddenly changed in an adverse direction. So I may or may not. Alright, I gotta do a little bit of moderation. I'm doing it now so I don't have to do it next time. Let's see. Yes, I know. The more people who enter the live chat, the more trolling there is. That is just the inevitable reality. I know Zeke Lunder was lamenting this earlier. So far, I've been pretty lucky, but perhaps my luck has run out. So, anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Stay safe out there. I don't expect an unexpected catastrophe. There just aren't the right weather conditions for it. We don't expect strong winds overnight, but we'll see tomorrow what tomorrow brings. And I may have live streams this weekend. I may not. I kind of hope I don't because that means that things didn't get out of hand. But as we've seen so far, that's no guarantee of anything. So we'll see how it goes. And have a good evening. Stay safe out there. And don't worry too much if you're on or near UCLA campus. I think the campus message is correct. Stay aware. But it's very unlikely that there'll be a need for any sort of campus evacuation. All right, talk to you all later, probably later this week.